Please stand for the prayer. Dear God, today as this session opens, we pray that your presence will be before us and everyone who serves in the decision-making process of our city. We pray for direction, which will lead our city to be strong and unified. May we continue the legacy of our founders. May we be granted this day the wisdom to make decisions which will be for the good of our city. We also pray for your special blessing on all those who are working to transform our city and make it a better place to live and work. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilor Belanger.
Here.
Councilor Elliott.
Here.
Mayor Kennedy.
Here.
Councilor Leahy.
Here.
Councilor Leary. Here. Councilor Mercia.
Here.
Councilor Milanazzo. Councilor Rourke.
Here.
Councilor Samaras.
Here.
8 present.
First order of business are the minutes of the Downtown Redevelopment Subcommittee of October 25th and the City Council meeting of October 25th for acceptance. Do we have a
So
motion
moved.
to approve and accept on file by Councilor Mercia, seconded by Councilor Rourke. Discussion. All in favor, all opposed, so voted. Next, under communications from the city manager, we have communications A through M. The first one, item A, is a report on the rehab of the JFK Plaza. Is there any discussion on item A? Council Samaras.
Thank you. They talked about Lowell being a gateway city and how important it is to do something like that. In the report, you talk about needing flags to be donated. Is it possible that through the mayor's office and your own office, you could send out a letter to the various organizations that are in this city that specially have requested flag raisings with the mayor and the city council on many occasions? I think they'd be more than glad to provide us with those flags. I think I'd like to see that plaza someday with over 50 flags representing this wonderful city. Lowell is a gateway city, it's a welcoming city, but Mr. Manager, because of your quick action, I've had, when I say a number, at least 10 people come up to me stating that they've been to the plaza and they thought this was done the right way, and they're proud to be part of the city. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought that this report was a lot of work and a lot of thought was put into it. I'm thrilled that the DPD will work with the DPW to determine the most practical and affordable solution. I think this is a great move, a great report. I did see the schematic design to some degree. Looks beautiful. I know there's a lot of work that needs to be done there, but I did not see anything about they would have green space, but they'd have dedicated space for locating new monuments, and there's always some interest in that. I know the Laotian people are interested in having a monument as well. So I'm thinking, I didn't see the outline of where the monuments would be taking place.
Any further discussion? Mr.
No,
Manager?
he's going to comment.
Thank you. Yeah. Right now, envision the front of City Hall when you come in. There's 2 islands with the trees.
Right.
We're going to add a 3rd island.
Okay.
And that's where the monuments are going to go, on that 3rd island.
That'll be wonderful. And people are here from all over the world, from many, many different countries, and to have their flag, a piece of their life, their roots, that's magnificent. So I'm very happy with this motion and this proposal, and I support it immensely. Thank you.
And when you leave the council meeting tonight, there's lights on top of the poles now, so it lights up the flags at nighttime.
Right.
So
That's beautiful.
Tom Bellegarde did a great job.
Yes, he did.
And
Thank you
Celine Gettings has done a great job, because we actually have 64 nations
Yeah.
represented at Lowell High School. So we have 18 flagpoles out there now, and we're going to rotate them. with the different
Well,
flags.
there's 19, actually.
Are there? Okay.
Right. But can I just say that if a letter does go out to the different groups, ethnic groups, if you could put a size of the flag that they would need a size, thank you, that'd be wonderful, thanks.
Councilor Elliott.
Thank you. Just very briefly, it does look very nice with the flags. And knowing there are 64, I was going to suggest, Mr. Manager, maybe we can also look at maybe putting them inside City Hall. And I know I've been to a couple of town halls, and they certainly don't have 64, but they do. They have installed them in other city halls representing all the people in the community. Whether that works here or not, I don't know. But just a thought that some other communities do that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further discussion on item A? Councilor Samaras.
No, thank you. That was a good idea by Councilor Elliott, but could I also say the idea of placing them also on inside and outside of, starting with the police station or where the Department of Planning and Development is, and actually looping towards City Hall. We've started a good thing, and I think it's important that we do display these flags, both inside and outside. Thank you.
Maybe we just need more flagpoles.
I think they can be bought at a reasonable price against the buildings. Thank you.
Any further discussion on item A? If not, we'll move on to item B, the Granite United Church and the Sullivan School. Any discussion? If not, we'll move on to item C, inappropriate crossing on Powell Street. Council Leary.
First, thank you very much for the report. I appreciate it. Has anyone reached out to the neighbor there that had the complaint? And I don't know what the feedback was in terms of this plan that monitoring plan that we have in place. Through you to the manager.
I had Mike Damaris reach out to that neighbor, and so I'll get a report from Mike on what they said. But it appears to me we're going to have, and we all agree, we're going to do that bump out in the spring.
So the pop out will happen. I think ultimately, I think the guy's fence has been hit 2 or 3 times already, and it's a challenging little intersection there. And I appreciate that you've taken the time. Your folks have taken the time to speak with the gentleman. I think the mayor, you had a motion on it as well, a similar motion to it too.
I've been tempted myself to take that left turn.
Yeah, I know exactly. You're not the only one. Thank you.
Council Leahy.
Thank you. I was going to say the same thing, that it's just too tempting and you can't tie up man hours. So if we do that bump out in the spring, that'll be good. Thank you.
Any further discussion on this item? Council Mercer.
For the listening public, 32 citations for one-way violations were issued. So I think the police are on top of this issue. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this? We'll move on to item D, the District and Superior Court disposition. Any discussion? Council Leahy.
I just want to say thank you for the report. And basically what we're doing is just letting them know that if we have interest in it, we really want the building. So thank you for the report, and we'll just keep an eye on it.
Any further discussion? Thought we'll move on to item E, firearms training. Council Leary.
First, thank you very much for the follow-up. I know this is like a follow-up to the initial motion that I had on the how many folks have actually applied for licenses. I guess when I read it, I guess ultimately, the ultimate cost, I guess to the chief, the cost says $100 for the program. I have 2 real questions of that. Is that the total cost that one needs to spend in order to get that application for it, or are there additional costs that are part of the process that we have in place at this time?
Counselor. Thank you. That is an additional cost, so there's a $100 application cost that is universal across the state to get a firearms license. This cost, this $100 training, is in addition to that. And when we originally discussed this, I believe it was in February, there was some indication that the cost could be much, much higher than that, up to and over $1,100 per course. We didn't think that was realistic, but very quickly after we implemented the policy, we got a private concern from Tingsboro to offer the additional training for $100. And quite candidly, if we were to do that in-house and have to rent a facility because we don't have our own, provide officers on overtime, and then assume some kind of liability that would be incurred potentially, we couldn't approximate that cost even close. So.
I appreciate that. So the ultimate cost then to apply for the license is $200 then?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
that's correct.
And I guess, so, and the only other question I had is there more than one vendor that provides the service, or is it just one vendor at this point? Or
There's one, and there's another one that has expressed interest in there, so there'll be two, similar cost.
okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Counselor. Any further discussion on this item? If not, we'll move on to the status of the former Waterworks building. Counselor Samaras.
Thank you, Mayor Kennedy. Again, Mr. Manager, I want to thank you for this report. The Waterworks building on Hampshire Street, the reason for my motion was that the Centerville Neighborhood Council was concerned that the abandoned building was a danger to the children in the area. And when you did set up a meeting with the Centerville Neighborhood Group, I know there were some suggestions of perhaps turning that into a community center. But it looks like the restoration of that building would be cost prohibitive. But it's nice to know that there's plans to then take the building down and possibly make that into a garden area with Mill City Grows or an active court. But thank you for the response to this. I'm sure the Centerville Neighborhood Group will be very pleased with this. Thank you.
Counselor Belanger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I appreciate the response. Mr. Mayor, through you to the manager. Mr. Manager, what's the approximate cost of demolishing this building?
It's approximately $150,000, and the good news is the funding source that we were targeting to do this demolition just came through yesterday, is that this council declared land on Gorham Street surplus, and we were able to sell it for enough, about $156,000, so we have the $150,000 that we now will take down this building on Hampshire Street and begin the construction of the Mill City garden and the other plans that we have for the area. So that's good news that happened just yesterday.
Wonderful. That is great news, Mr. Manager. Now, when does the invitation to bid go out? How long is that process? What kind of time frame are we looking at here?
I would think in the spring we'd take it down, would
Okay.
be the best time to do it.
That would be sufficient. Thank you. Great work, Mr. Manager. Thank you.
The reason I say that is that we don't want to just take the building down and leave the place an empty lot. What we'd like to do is take the building down and then have Mill City Grows do their garden around it so that it looks a lot better than just an empty lot.
Okay, sounds like a great initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any further discussion? If not, we'll move on to the update on the bike patrol. Any discussion on that? Counselor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I appreciate the update on this patrol, and I'm interested in it only because of the response time when we hear complaints or concerns from people who call, and particularly on the weekends. I know it's very busy. So this report indicates there are 24 officers that are assigned to the DRO, the district response officers. Is the chief still here? Oh. So thank you for the report, Chief, and I think this is helpful. I'm not trying to micromanage by any stretch. I'm just trying to understand how they're deployed, knowing that we do put on more police officers. I think it's a good thing. I think it is making a significant impact on crime in the city. But these officers, they do not respond to 911 calls.
That's not their principal responsibility, that's
Right.
correct.
So is it typical that these officers, 8 of them, are on bicycles, but not always downtown because of they're not allowed to ride on the sidewalks?
That's correct.
So specifically, where are they most effective?
Well, they're most effective in some of the more congested neighborhoods around the city, and then obviously in some of the parks and common areas across the city. So typically, they're engaged in problem-solving activities, community policing activities. They're really a really unique and a very good tool to increase the officers' presence in the neighborhood. If we put officers on foot, which I think is a great idea, they're limited mobility. They can only, go at a certain speed, walk. And putting an officer on a bicycle provides a much more effective and efficient way to get through those congested neighborhoods. But it still provides that personal contact to the residents. So it's kind of a happy medium, a balanced approach. And typically that's what they're involved in: community policing activities, identify problems, and then going out and working on those problem locations.
Okay, good. Thank you. I appreciate it. I think it makes some sense. I understand that public safety is not just police in cars, that it should be on foot in some cases. It should be perhaps on bicycles. What do these officers do in the inclement weather?
So depending on the specific thing that they've working on, the problem or the location, they could be on bicycles for a portion of their shift or their entire shift. They could be on walking patrol. They could be in a cruiser, depending on what they're working on. Certainly in inclement weather, and it's at a certain point now as we approach and get into the dead of the winter, they probably will put the bikes away. Although we do have one particular officer that gets his own snow tires, so it's, he's
think I've seen him.
remarkable. And I've told him we'll
Maybe
buy
that's
the
what
snow
triggered
tires
this
for him.
motion. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, but thank you. So you do have the ability to deploy sort of on a as-needed basis.
Absolutely.
To some degree, so that makes some sense. Thank you for the explanation, Chief.
Council Leary.
Just quick, thank you, Chief. No questions, just a comment. I think the community policing part of it, being proactive is important. And I think that's what you see. I see the bikes, you see them in the acre, you see them in the Highlands. I mean, I've even seen them up in the upper Highlands. And I'm assuming they're probably in Lower Belvedere and Pawtucketville and what have you, because they do have that ability to get that access. And they're folks you can come right up to, and you see kids in playgrounds going up and speaking to them. So I think the proactive nature of what that is valuable. And that's really, instead of just catching a crime, if you can prevent it, makes a lot of sense. So I commend you on it, and I commend the officers that are doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any further discussion? If not, we'll move on to the next item, which is an update on the Lowell Memorial Auditorium balcony. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad to receive this report as well, because it talked about, there was a concern that some acts were not coming into the city because they couldn't get their equipment in, the props and things like that, because the width of and height of the doorway would not allow that to come in. We don't want to ever have to turn events away because of this, and they know that it's important. So capital funds are being allocated for the design and construction, which will begin in early 2017. So this is good news to know that we are addressing a problem that we have and correcting it. So that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any further discussion? If not, we'll move on to the next item. There's a registered speaker for item I, which is the parking garages in the city.
Ahmed Hebert.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the council, Mr. Manager. I'm here to speak on this. I read the report. I've been working at the garage, some of you might know, for the last 10 months over at the garages, repairing them. And it kind of intrigued me on the parking, how much the parking is very important to this city, because working in the garages, you see the people coming in, they're going out, and it's really important to keep up with the parking, because the parking garages fill up right away. As soon as they empty, as soon as a shift, like you'd say a shift change, they empty out, and all of a sudden the next group of people are coming in. The parking is very important to the city. That was a very thorough report. I read the whole thing. I can't believe I read it, but I did. And Nick, the guy from parking, he's sitting next to me tonight. When I told him I was speaking, he says, look, like he's seen Halloween again. But I says, it ain't gonna be bad. He's doing a great job organizing with Acme. I mean, we're taking a lot of parking spots at one time, giving them back some, and they're organizing it great. He's doing a great job. They always say a great leader, Mr. Manager, surrounds himself with the very best people, and Nick's one of them. I'll tell you, he does a great job down there. And like the report says, Lowell is in very much need of more parking in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Samaras.
Thank you, Mayor Kennedy. And I want to thank the city manager for the quick turnaround on this report. And it truly is a good report, because we know in this city, if this city is going to continue to grow and to succeed, parking is a major issue and a major problem. The report certainly speaks to that. In the report, you also outline, Mr. Navin, I believe, outlined 3 strategies that could be used to increase parking. Is it possible that Mr. Navin could speak on that so our citizens that do watch this program get an idea of what the concerns are and what has to be done?
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, through you to Councilor Samaras. So the 3 strategies that were indicated in the report were certainly building additional infrastructure, such as new parking garages, but 2 other strategies is managing transportation from a holistic standpoint, and that is with what is referred to as parking resource management and transportation demand management. So Parking resource, excuse me, parking resource management can refer to policies and programs that result in more efficient use of parking resources. So we currently employ many strategies, such as, regulating parking, parking enforcement, shared parking, where we have a pool of municipal parking that is accessible to both the business and residential community. But there are also other strategies that we may be able to improve upon, or opportunities that we can use to further adopt some principles, such as better user information from a marketing perspective, and manufacturing increased capacity through the way that we manage our resources, such as like time limits and discouraging the storage of vehicles, valet parking, if you will. Transportation demand management is having alternative ways to get to your destination and to get into the city, and having these alternative ways to be, from the perspective of the traveler, advantageous to them from a fiscal standpoint, from a time standpoint, from an ease of getting from point A to point B. So really to deal with this issue of, the downtown becoming more dense and the footprint growing and proliferating, we need to not only consider providing parking, which is a very important subsection of transportation, but also looking to see if there are other ways that we can get people to where they want to go.
No, thank you for what you've shown through this report, that, number one, it can be handled, but it's also a very difficult and complex task. Sometimes people, build a garage and there's no issue, but it's far more complex than that. And you talked about the expenses of the garage, but you've talked about other ways of trying to educate the community to work in a better fashion. You also speak to the point of bringing in a consultant to really perhaps look at what the future holds for us and what has to be done. Is that going to be part of this?
I think ultimately it should be strongly considered. I think that we as a city and as an administration can draw the appropriate conclusions, but to do so in a timely manner may take more resources than we're able to allocate due to the day-to-day responsibilities we have as, departments. So in the effort, for the sake of expediency and, to make sure that our conclusions are validated, I think that to have an outside set of eyes that has dealt with, municipalities throughout the nation and have spent, hundreds of collective years of experience, like, evaluating these same issues, that, it would help validate our conclusions and lead us to the appropriate path.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, thank you for the report. Your administration is showing due diligence in this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Leary.
Yeah, thank you as well for responding so quickly to the motion. A couple questions on it. How long before you make a proposal to get a consultant, or I'm assuming you're going to make that proposal, and what do you expect the estimated cost would be to do that?
We are going forward with this right now. I would think it's going to be probably in the vicinity of $100,000. But when you're talking about spending millions upon millions of dollars in construction, we want to make sure that we're doing it correctly, and it's worth the investment in the experts to tell us what's the best way to deal with our transportation and our parking.
Okay. No, I agree. I think the goals that the council has and the administration have regarding just the Hamilton Canal, never mind the rest of the city, really are we need to have that infrastructure in place. None of our goals will be achieved if we don't have that infrastructure, and unfortunately, it requires parking. And if you look at the report, which I think is pretty outlines the challenges that we face, which are significant, without that, nobody's going to be building anything in the Hamilton Canal. And quite frankly, other parts of the city will have an impact. So I think putting that money and spending it wisely is a positive thing for the council. I think ultimately it'll be a positive thing for the taxpayer, and what we really need to do, and really be aggressive with getting that move. Because ultimately, if I'm going to invest millions of dollars to build a building, commercial or otherwise, I'm not going to do it if I can't find a place for folks to park. But I appreciate the report. I think it was very comprehensive, it was very eye-opening, and I appreciate the fact that you are in your administration's being very proactive. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any further discussion? Thanks. All right, moving on to after-school permitting. Any discussion? Counselor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the city manager, thank you for this report, although I think it's very unclear, and possibly some things in here is probably not true, and I know that you're only putting down what you have received. So I'd like to refer this to the Facilities Subcommittee and meet with the very people that you had a meeting with on October 19th. I wasn't able to go to that. I didn't even know about it. I take exception with the fact that a principal would make a statement that we were meddling in their business. I think it's my duty as a city councilor to represent a constituent, no matter who that is in the city, and if they call that meddling, I take exception to that. I'm going to meddle. I've been meddling for the past 21 years, and I'm still going to continue to meddle till we get to the proper aspect of this issue or any issue that I address. Let me just say that when it comes to the first come, first serve, I think that that's not a little bit fair. I don't see here what the tiers are to give permits out to the neighborhood. If someone from Tingsboro comes first, are they able to get on to this scheduling first before the person in the neighborhood? So there's a lot of discrepancies here. If everybody is not notified at the same time, how is that fair? There's a lot of things that I want to discuss. There's people that would like to address this. I see we have an assistant person that oversees the appeal right in the school department. I think that's a little bit biased. I don't see it being a neutral person. I think it should be a committee, not just in the hands of one person. I have concerns with this report. Not that I'm faulting you by any means, absolutely not. But you were given information that I feel is not fair, for one thing. You only reported what they told you, which is true, but what they reported to me is not fair, and that, to me, is a discrepancy that I'd like to refer to the Facility Subcommittee. And if we could notify all these people that met with you, I'd like to speak to them face to face. For example, I liked Gary Frisch to be there, Michael Cassidy. I have nothing but admiration for Terry Couliard, but I do want to meet with these people. Thank you.
Second.
So Councilor Mercia has made a motion to refer this matter to the Subcommittee on Facilities, Joint Subcommittee?
No, just...
City Council Subcommittee, seconded by Councilor Rourke. Discussion on the motion, Councilor Elliott?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a good motion, Council Mercia, and I support it, and I endorse it wholeheartedly. This has been a long-standing problem as long as I've been involved in youth activities, and that's going on 24 years. I think Lowell organizations should be given preference. I think we've gone through permitting issues, and who knows who. I understand that the principal has the authority. I think it's under ed reform for the school, and I think that's a good thing, and they take it serious. But the Lowell taxpayers, more often than not, they're organizations looking to use the facility by volunteers. No one's getting paid, and they sort of get their nose thumbed at, and I think that's wrong. I have been in that position, so. And I think this is a good idea to straighten it out, to lay some ground rules, and maybe set up a protocol. Lowell organizations first. Then if there are some outside organizations, fine. And then when you do get the permit, I think it should be just expected that you're treated nicely by those individuals who let you in, let you out, and they make the decision. So I think this is a long time coming that we need to put a process and a protocol in place for the people that are paying the bills. And by the way, they rent them. I mean, organizations rent these places, and I think it's a situation that needs to be straightened out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any further discussion? Councilor Rourke?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In reading the report, just out of curiosity, it says that at first it's based on a first-come, first-served basis, and then it says it's broken down into tiers. I mean, wouldn't it be better just to have a hard deadline of, if you want to use, certain school, all applications for time and place need to be put in by a certain date, and then you could implement, the tier system. It just doesn't make sense. It's almost you have two answers to one question here. So, look forward to the subcommittee, and hopefully we can get it all straightened out. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Elliott.
Can I just follow up on that very quickly, Mr. Mayor? I think that's important because everything is done online. So those organizations that have their schedule, they go and reserve all kinds of space, so then other organizations are blocked out. So I'm not so sure first come, first serve makes sense, because it has to be fair. There should be a fair and equal distribution to those organizations, and not, some organizations just go on and block out, days and months, quite frankly. So I just want to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Rowe.
Just one more, Mr. Mayor, to the manager. Mr. Manager, when your team went there for this meeting, when they left, were they satisfied with the outcome?
I don't think they were completely satisfied. We got the sense that, this is their domain, and they're going to keep that as their domain. I think getting at least an appeal process was a victory for us, because there wasn't any. There were two things that I thought were a victory. Number one, they have to put down the reason you're being denied, and then there's an appeal process. So there were those two minor victories, but I look forward to the subcommittee hearing also to see their presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion? All opposed? So voted. Next item is the American Disabilities Act access to city parks and playgrounds. Any discussion? Councilor Samaras.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, I want to thank the city manager and Mr. Bellegarde for the review of the availability of ADA access to our parks and playgrounds. Mr. Bellegarde's report speaks to the steps that are being taken to ensure that our parks are truly handicap accessible. I've spoken to many people that are handicapped, and the one thing that they'll all talk about is the beauty of our parks and how great they are for our children and for people to walk in. But handicapped people, people in wheelchairs, also want that same right. And I'm pleased with the action that the city's taken to ensure that the various parks are going to be handicap accessible. Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you. Just for the listening, viewing public, there are 92 parks, over 120 green spaces in the city for our parks department to oversee. I think that's quite important to know. That's a lot of work.
Thank you.
And also, our Commission on Disabilities, they receive some money every year. Through their efforts, they did give $10,000 to make the park at Gage Field handicap accessible, and they even bought a swing for the handicapped child. So I thought that was quite remarkable of them. Nice to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any further discussion on this item? If not, we'll move on to the next item, which is the letter of appreciation. Councilor Leahy.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted, through you to the manager, thank you for sending that out. Again, the Parks Department did a great job with that field and the park, and even just taking the initiative of spending the money wisely up there. Thank you.
Mr. Manager.
And you should see the job they did at Calorie Park. And they worked with Lowell, because that's the tennis courts are the home courts of Lowell Catholic. And Lowell Catholic paid for the tennis courts to be painted in their school colors. So it looks terrific. So they do a great job all around the city.
Any further discussion on this item? If not, we'll move on to the next one, which is the NIBRS report for July 2016. Any discussion? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to accept all the communications from the city manager, place them on file. We have a motion to that effect by Councilor Rourke, seconded by Councilor Mercia. Discussion on the motion. All in favor, all opposed, so voted. Next is a communication from the city manager requesting out-of-state travel for 2 members of the Lowell Police Department. Do we have a motion to approve? Motion approved by Councilor Rourke, seconded by Councilor Mercia. Discussion on the motion. Roll call.
Councilor Belanger.
Yes.
Councilor Elliott.
Yes.
Mayor Kennedy.
Yes.
Councilor Leahy.
Yes.
Councilor Leary.
Yes.
Councilor Mercia.
Yes.
Councilor Milonazo. Councilor Rourke.
Yes.
Councilor Samaras.
Yes.
8 yeas.
Next, we have a vote to cancel the council meetings of November 29th, December 20th, and December 27th, 2016. If there's no objection, we'll waive the full first reading, go to the second reading to cancel the council meetings of November 29th, December 20th, and December 27th in 2016. Do we have a motion to approve? Motion to approve by Councilor Mercia, seconded by Councilor Rourke. Discussion on the motion, roll call.
Counsel Belanger.
Yes.
Counselor Elliott. Mayor Kennedy.
Yes.
Counsel Leahy.
Yes.
Counsel Leary.
Yes.
Counsel Mercia.
Yes.
Counsel Milonazo. Counsel Rourke.
Yes.
Counsel Samaras.
Yes.
8 yeas.
Next will be subcommittee reports. I think there are no subcommittee reports to be given this evening, so we'll move on to petitions. We have one claim, one property claim. The Chair will entertain a motion to refer to the Law Department for a report and recommendation. We've motion by Councilor Rourke, seconded by Councilor Mercia. Discussion on the motion. All in favor, all opposed, so voted. Next, under City Council motions, the first motion of the evening is a motion by Council Leary and Council Milonazo, a request that the city manager work with the University of Lowell and the Lowell Regional Transit Authority to coordinate and determine the feasibility of providing transportation between the Gallagher Transportation Terminal, the Hamilton Canal Innovation District, and other developing business districts within Lowell. In addition, opening a discussion between the parties that coordinate overall improvements to public transportation within Lowell. The motion needs no second. Councilor Leary.
Just quickly, this motion kind of ties off of the challenges we had from the financing from the trolley not being reality. But it also stems from that you really have two different distinct busing services in the city of Lowell. If you look at the University of Mass system, it sort of, not sort of, it actually overlaps in a lot of areas where the LRTA overlaps. So having that conversation to see where we can maximize efficiencies, we talk about traffic patterns in the city and talking about the garages that Nick just articulated. This is kind of ties into exactly what he's saying. How do we get alternative means of transportation and make them effective? And it also goes back to what the council's goal and your goal, Mr. Manager, regarding the Hamilton Canal. How do you get folks to come into that district and make that an easier access? And as other business districts throughout the city, be it downtown or the Couples Square, wherever in the city, Bridge Street, et cetera, this is really important that we have that access be running as effectively as possible. And I think when you have two big busing, really, companies or what have you in the city, they should be coordinating. And if we can facilitate that, granted, we only have one voice on the LRTA, but we can at least reach out to the university and reach out to the LRTA and begin that discussion. It won't happen overnight, and it probably won't everything we probably won't agree with, but ultimately we can make it better, and ultimately that'll have an economic impact to our goals that we're trying to achieve. So I think it's a good motion. Unfortunately, the trolleys are not financially possible at this point. This might be the second alternative. You can look at it similar to like you're looking at the Silver Line at the Seaport District in Boston, a minier version. But what's really cool about it is you already have two different busing districts really within the city. So maybe there's some opportunity there that we can maximize. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, all opposed, so voted. The next motion of the evening is a motion by Councilor Elliott, request that the city manager report on the procedure for administrative review for the Zoning Board of Appeals. Seconded by Councilor Rourke. We have two registered speakers. Councilor, do you want to speak first, or do you want
Speakers first, please, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Deb Forgione.
John.
I guess we're not going in alphabetical order. My name is John Hamblett. I live at 495 Varnum Avenue. I'm co-chair of the Pawtuckettville Citizens Council. As this council is well aware, the PCC spends quite a bit of time in this room, mostly at land board meetings, whether they be zoning board, conservation commission, or planning board. And over the past several months, an issue has come up under the umbrella of administrative review that's been of concern that we wanted to share with you. My layperson's understanding of an administrative review is you've got a project, you go before a zoning board, it gets approved, and then something changes. If it's a minor change, you can request an administrative review, and the zoning board can act on that. I think it's a legal term considered a substantial change. If it's a substantial change, then you actually have to reapply or you have to go through a different process. We believe that this concept of substantial change is being unevenly applied. And we are asking the City Council and the City Manager, the City of Lowell, for a clear written definition of what is substantial change, particularly as it pertains to zoning board decisions. We have Massachusetts Wetlands Regulations, Section 9-1-1, that spells out exactly what a substantial change is in conservation regulations. There may be an equivalent for zoning board, but we haven't been able to find it. So if I could just give you an example. The charter school across the river, see, this is Pawtucketville, so it's across the river. They want to add 2 floors. That's a substantial change. And they have to reapply to the zoning board. If they wanted to change the color of the pillars out front, that would probably not be a substantial change, and it could go under an administrative review. So our first request is if we could have a clear written definition of what substantial change is as it applies to the zoning board. Our second request is that administrative hearings, such as the administrative review and a pre-application meeting, be opened uniformly to the public. And let me just give you an example. In June of 2015, an abutter came before City Council. They wanted Woodbine Avenue abandoned. I know because I was here and I testified before you. Also, Louisa Varnum, representing the Varnum family, testified before you. And she said, my family owns the land. The city solicitor said, can I see a copy of that deed? And I think that was produced. And so we all understood that there was a claim being made on a piece of property. 3 months later, the ZBA holds a pre-application hearing, which does not require public comment. The plan is to build apartments using the parking on Woodbine Avenue. Well, we all know that there's been a personal claim on that land. Legal department knows it. City clerk knows it. And yet, there was no public comment. And so the zoning board went ahead and listened to this entire meeting without the information. In November, 2 months later, 3 months later, the case comes before the zoning board. And there's a public hearing. And the Varnum family produce a deed. And the zoning board is outraged. And the applicant is outraged. And I have no idea why. Because you knew about it, and you knew about it, and all of you knew about it 6 months before. And yet, for some reason, there's a great surprise. The result is the developer's attorney, Mr. Geary, Attorney Geary, questions the authenticity of the deed and the efficacy of the Varnum family. And the ZBA rules, as Mr. Slagle put in his memo to you, that the document is clouded. That was all unnecessary. Fast forward 11 months, October 24th, the same case comes up again, and a 40% change in parking is not substantial, 40%. The parking on Woodbine Avenue is removed. There's a 40% increase in parking. There's a major construction project to build 8 more parking spaces. The number of units are changed, but it's not substantial. And therefore, the public cannot comment. I get to stand before you now because City Council has a process that allows public to speak even when there's not a public hearing. The Conservation Commission routinely will allow interested parties to speak even if it's not a public hearing. The Planning Board will ask us questions and allow us to speak if there is not a hearing. But the Zoning Board has twice chosen not to allow public comment, In those instances, the information held by the public would have had a significant impact on the outcome of the proceedings. So, councilors, Mr. City Manager, with respect to administrative reviews, we are asking for a clear written statement of what substantial change is. And we are requesting a uniform policy across all the land use boards that allow for public comment during an administrative review or a pre-application hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deb Forgione, the chairman of the Pawtuckaville Citizen Council. That meeting a year ago was legend, and John Leahy was in the room with us that night. It went till 12:30 in the morning. So, administrative review. One of the reasons we wanted to bring it to light, we want it to be open, we want it to be discussed, we want input, we want things to get better. That's why we're here. So, with that said, I just want to give a little bit of information about administrative review and what the impact was a year later. The night of that meeting, that was legend, till 12:30 in the morning, 35 people were there to hear and speak on the issue on Varnum Avenue. So 35 people, a lot of them have to leave. We all work in the morning. That 35 people started to be 18 people. So during that public hearing, the 35 people that really wanted to speak, had an interest, wanted input, had to leave. There was no postponement of that meeting. When you have your meetings, you leave at 10, and then you'll vote and you'll say, well, I'll stay after 10. But this night, we felt held hostage, 11 o'clock, 11:30. There was no postponement. There was not a full house because people had to leave. And that night, they closed the public hearing. Therefore, people were on their way home. They didn't even hear the rest of the meeting. My husband taped the show for me because I left at 11:45 so I could rewatch the rest of the meeting. So many people wanted to speak that night, and they closed the public hearing. And then that night, as I watched it the next morning, they put it into administrative review in order to continue. Close the public hearing, your administrative review. And we knew a year ago that didn't feel right, because that meant we could never speak again. But we didn't know what our recourse was. Like, can you appeal administrative review? Like, what will trigger administrative review to say, hey, this has to go back to a public hearing? We don't know. So we're asking, could there be, to the public, something that we could all hang our hats on as the public when you go to a meeting? What is administrative review? What are the parameters? Who decides it? And can you appeal administrative review? What happens? So you know, it's not what we do for a living. We need to find out what we can do, and you need to know too, because anybody that watched that meeting, including John Leahy, who was there with us, watching that clock go to 11:45, 12 o'clock at night, we were still there, and then we hear it's closed. And a lot went on after that. So here we are, a year later, we go to the meeting, it's administrative review, and we understand what administrative review is. No matter what happens, you cannot speak. And we watched what happened. Now, the planning board had administrative review of the charter school. And then what they did was, wow, they want to go up 2 more stories. Let's take it out of administrative review. Let's go to the public. Let's let them know what's going on in case they want to speak. Open. Everybody could talk about it. That night, they got their approval. Everybody felt good about it. They got to speak. Whether they were for it or not, they got to speak. Meeting was closed. It was a 50% change. The administrative review on the zoning board in Varnum Avenue was a 40% change, and it stayed under administrative review. It went from 13 units to 5. That's 40% more. And it also went for, they said they were reducing the parking spots, but they weren't reducing them because they never had 27. It was, we hope we never, ever see what happened a year ago happen again. We hope what happened at the last meeting at zoning board never happens again, where you have the public go to a meeting and leave and feel their voice not only wasn't heard, but you totally didn't understand what was going on. You didn't have guidance. You didn't know what your rights were. And the thing is, if you know all those things and you walk away losing, at least you understood it. We still don't understand how this happened. We just don't. We don't know the rules. We don't know what the process is. We don't know what our rights are. And after what just happened, right now we have a project 40% more. I do not believe that you're going to be able to find any project in the city that got an increase in units under an administrative review. I just don't think you're going to find it, but that just happened. So in light of that, I know I didn't want to take up everybody's time tonight. I sent all the councilors some comments and some requests, but most importantly, if this is a motion that's been approved, if we could have these questions answered so that when it comes back to the council, the public can hear it, it's something we can hang our hat on, and it is, what is administrative review? When you go to the boards, what is it? And how is it used? Why is it used? I went on to try to find a definition of it. I can't even find a real definition. I know what administrative means, and I don't think administrative equates to, and here's 5 more units without a public hearing, but that's what happened. I want to know when it can be used, what are the rules, what's the parameters, which boards use them? Do all boards use administrative reviews? And also, can administrative review be appealed? So with that said, like I said, that meeting a year ago was legend. What just happened was a result of what happened a year ago. And I feel that this is one of the best councils we've had, and I believe we've got a good administration. So when we bring these to you, it's to make things better. So when we go to the boards and we're weighing in and we're working together as a city, that everybody feels good that they understand the process and they have a part in the process and they can speak in the process. We don't win every time we go, but if we walk away and we understood how we lost, we can do better next time. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that both speakers really summed the issue up pretty well, but I actually happened to watch that meeting this past week, and I was taken aback, Mr. Manager, as well, knowing that the process was extensive, the public hearing was very lengthy, went into the early hours of the morning, and I couldn't understand how the public wasn't invited to participate, knowing that project was going to go from 13 to 18 units. Now, I don't fault the board. They were acting on advice or guidance that they had received from Mr. Slagle. So I'm not faulting the board, but it just seemed as if something was taking place after all of the concerns were aired at the public hearing a year ago, that they were just thrown out the window. I think it's substantial. From the opinion we received from Mr. Slagle, administrative review is usually just changing circumstances that weren't anticipated at the time of the hearing. This was a substantial change, and that should trigger a hearing, as already been alluded to. So, Mr. Slagle's response, a red flag went up right away that said, if it's a substantial change. 13, this was the issue from day one, that there were too many units being placed there because there wasn't ample parking. It's a busy roadway, and putting 18 units there is significant, and that's what the concern was from the neighborhood. And I have to thank the neighborhood organization. They're vigilant. They do protect the neighborhood, because sometimes we can't pay attention to everything. So I think it's important for us to get a clarification on exactly what would trigger a public hearing. What, this Forgione is right, what is substantial, and I think that'll help clarify the issue. When this change came about, I was waiting for people in the audience to speak, quite frankly, and then the board said, well, there's no public input. So I think that it's important that we get an opinion. I'd like to make a motion to send this to, I'm sure my colleagues want to speak, but make a motion to send this to the law department, Mr. Manager, to answer some of these questions, because in my opinion, this was substantial, and we need to, make sure this doesn't happen again in the future. So, especially in the interest of transparency and knowing that we want to let people know when they go down and spend time and express their opinion, it's going to be heard. And by the way, the ZBA did grant a conditional approval for 13 units. So to the average person, including myself, I think, okay, it's going to be 13 units unless there's some slight changes, but they're not going to add 5 units to this. So I'd like to make that in the form of a motion, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
It was 25, I thought. Because that Woodbine Avenue is considered,
This is where
those
it
aren't parking
gets,
spots.
okay, this is where it gets to be, okay, so then that night, they had 16 parking spaces. That was it, because they were trying to use the Woodbine Ave property that belongs to Louis Savanum. When we left that night, and you can see it on film, they had 16 parking spaces, and they got 13 units. The night that we were there, a week ago, they said that he now has 25. So what they did was he found on his property on the left-hand side, when we say he found them, he's identified that he can have up to 25 spaces. But in public hearing and in that meeting, nobody ever said how he was going to get them. It was never nobody's sure how many he's going to get, so thank you.
Thank you. I think this is a good motion. It just needs to be reviewed. I watched several of the meetings on this, and it just doesn't make sense. So, we don't want to prohibit people from coming into the city and developing projects like this, but you got to work with the neighborhoods. And, our goal always is to make the last project better, make the new project better than the last. So that's why you need to work with the neighborhood groups, and you need to work within the city parameters on this and follow the rules. And, that's why we have 2 parking spots per unit. So until some of this is cleared up, it just doesn't really make any sense. So I'm glad that we're going to send this further. And, we're glad that we have the help of the neighborhood groups. So whatever neighborhood you're in, these groups, hopefully you belong to one, they're good. They're good to have. Be active in your own neighborhood group, because, again, we want to make our neighborhoods better. So I look forward to the response.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know no matter what board we have rules. We have rules here on the council, but there's certain type of language that just doesn't seem clear, and that's what the people here are asking for, a clear definition of what a substantial change is. Zoning board does not allow public comment. That's bizarre. That's strange. That's something that I can't fathom it. What is the perimeters of the administrative review, and how can we, how is it used? Why is it used? When can it be used? And do all boards use it? And can administrative review be appealed? These are all legitimate questions. We're referring these questions to the law department, and I will look forward to getting the answers to these, because I have no idea about it. But I think it's it's not public friendly when you're going into 12:30 at night and having the meeting go on and on and on. That's not serving a proper purpose. That's why we have the 10 o'clock rule. If we feel that it's just a few more, like another half an hour, we could probably bypass that, suspend the rules, and go over it and take a vote on it. But to go past a certain amount of time, I'm ready for bed. It's as simple as that. The public has to work the next day. There should be, rules set in that respect as well. So maybe this is a good thing that these problems arise, because people can come forward and state them, and we can make them better. That's always a good thing. Maybe we could do that with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I share the same concerns as my colleagues here. I definitely, this has raised a few flags. I was not involved in the emails going back and forth, so I'm just hearing about this basically in the last 24 hours. So, you know, I think going back to the public hearing that, you know, a public hearing should not go into 12:30 at night. I was on that board 10 years. I don't think we ever exceeded 11 o'clock. I've served with Chairman Bailey. I have the utmost confidence in him and those board members, most certainly. But I probably think the call that should have been continued, the public hearing should have been continued around 11 p.m. Until 2 weeks, so the remainder of the public that didn't chime in were able to do so 2 weeks later. Unfortunately, it's time, but that's the process, and that should have been played out, in my opinion. But what we're talking about here is that why was it in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals as an administrative review? Okay, that is an arbitrary call made by Eric Slagle. Okay, the zoning board took a vote, they didn't put it there. They took a vote of what was in front of them based on the new evidence, okay? They didn't put it there. So I'd like to hear from Mr. Slagle how he classified this as an administrative review, which closes the public hearing. And that's Deb Forgione's point. It's not a public hearing. They can't speak. So I'd like to know why this was classified as an administrative review when there's units that were added and not a new petition, so to speak, where you have to notify abutters and basically advertise and start all over again. So that is my feedback. I'd like to know how Mr. Slagle derived that opinion on this, how it ended up as administrative review is what I'd like to know. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'm reminded of one of my favorite school committeemen of all time was a guy named Clemmy McDonough. Clemmy McDonough used to say very often, nothing good happens after 10 o'clock. I'm not sure what he did after 10 o'clock, but maybe it's a good idea for all boards to stop at 10 o'clock unless there's very special circumstances in a vote. So that's maybe one thing that we should consider. The second thing is the whole idea of administrative review. I tried to find it in the zoning code. I don't know if that comes from statute or where, but I think this whole council deserves an explanation of just where that notion comes from and what the parameters are for an administrative review. And the third thing is that when I looked at the report on administrative review, what the report said, which was just a one-page report, was that the nursing home had 36 parking spaces, and since the new use was going to be for 18 units, would also require 36 parking spaces, that it would be a wash. But the nursing home, as far as I know, was 101 beds. The zoning code calls for 1 parking space for every 3 beds. So the way I do the math, that would mean that, that they needed 34 parking spaces, not 36, which would then mean that the request for additional units should have been for 17 units, not for 18 units. But the idea that they have 25 parking spaces there just confuses me the most. And this is what I would like to see the law department look at is, I can understand that the nursing home might have had 25 or 27 parking spaces or whatever they had. But this went from a nursing home use to a residential use, which was a new use that the Board of Appeals determined was not a more detrimental use. But the idea that the nursing home was grandfathered for parking shouldn't mean that the grandfather exemption carries over to the new use. So the way I look at it, the residential use should have to have 2 parking spaces for every unit. Now, if they have 25 parking spaces, then it seems to me that that's enough for the 13 units. actually for 12 units. So that's really all they should get. So I don't know how we get to increasing the number of units from 13 to 18 and not satisfy the parking requirement at all. I mean, that's not, it seems to me that's not in the best interest of the city, it's not in the best interest of the neighborhood or anybody else, it's solely in the best interest of the developer. So those are all issues, I think, that have come up. I don't know how they came up with, you know, that the 36 parking spaces that the nursing home was supposed to have, and they really only had 34, was a reason for the new use, for residential use, to be the same. So I think there's a lot of questions with this residential review. I think there's a lot of questions just going forward. If there's nothing that can be done to remedy this or to undo this, then we ought to just take a strong look at just how we're going to do this going forward. I mean, certainly everybody that's been involved in this issue from the very beginning has reason to raise their eyebrows and wonder just what the heck happened and how did it all happen and how does it happen with administrative review. I have never heard of administrative review since I've been here, and I haven't been here forever, but I've been here for a little while, and I was here a long time ago. And never have I heard of a project coming under administrative review and this being done. So again, I don't know if it's by statute, but I did scan the zoning code. I could not find any reference to administrative review in the zoning code, so I don't know how the Board of Appeals is able to pass that off to the Division of Planning and Development. I think it's too bad that Mr. Slagle's not here, but I'll be looking forward to the answers to these questions as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments? So a motion by Councilor Elliott, second by Councilor Mercia, to send it to the Law Department and to the manager for some answers. All those in favor, all those opposed? Motion passed. Next motion of the evening by Councilor Elliott. Request the city manager to report on the status, progress of Plain Street realignment, Ayers City Industrial Park Plan. Seconded by Councilor Belanger. Councilor Elliott.
Thank you. The motion speaks for itself, Mr. Mayor. I know that we've had this discussion probably about a year ago, and I just want to know where we were at with it. And what triggered my concern was I read an article this week about Devon's. There was a Supertown meeting between Ayer, Shirley, Harvard, and the other community that makes up Ayer, and they just voted to rezone 44 acres for industrial development, light industrial, biotech, innovation center. So I hope that's not going to affect us. But when we're all competing for businesses, 44 acres, you know, it's right off the highway, was a concern. So this is one part of the city that still can be ripe for industrial development, commercial, and maybe research and development. So I'm kind of curious where we are with that realignment. I know we were getting a grant from the state to do that. So I'll look forward to the report, but do you have anything? I know the VFW was an important aspect of that. So are we close on that?
Yes, Mr. Coughlin has been working very closely. We want to make sure that we don't take, the VFW is trying to redevelop their property, and if we take by eminent domain too much from them on this side, it's going to impact that. So we've been negotiating a settlement of it. Mr. Coughlin is very close, and this is good timing because we'll have a good report to give you relative to the status of it.
Okay. I mean, I think it is becoming, it will be a desirable place once this is realigned, knowing it's right off the highway and there's access and it's already zoned. I know there's a cultivation building that has taken prime development spot right in the corner there. I'm not a fan, but so I just was also wondering while we're on this subject, Mr. Manager, is there does it make sense for the Lowell plan and planning and development, and I know there's a Merrimack Valley Economic Development Council, and there's our chamber here, to kind of put all the heads together to start reaching out to, I'm presuming there's a database with the state with businesses that are looking to expand, or can we reach out to them to start, I don't want to use the word marketing, but just reach out to say, you know, is there an interest? Are you going to be expanding? We have prime spaces. I know there's the Mass Office of Business Development, but is that something that I should probably file a motion because it's sort of not really germane to this subject, and perhaps I will, but it just seems that in the information age, getting all of our business organizations in the city together to come up with a strategy on how to reach out to businesses might make some sense. I don't know.
No, that's, it's interesting because we reached out to the Boston Redevelopment Association. We have some contacts there. Brian Golden used to serve in the legislature with him. He's a very astute person, brought the BRA a long way. We went down there to develop their model, to get their model, and we're going to bring that model back to Lowell and have our economic development office incorporate their model. It's interesting, and Boston wants to help us out because, believe it or not, we get certain points for state grants. For example, because we have a complete streets program, we get certain points that give us a leg up in a grant. The city of Boston, believe it or not, gets points if they refer businesses to gateway cities that can't locate in Boston. So they're looking to work with us in a cooperative manner. So we're adopting the BRA model. We're training our economic development department in it right now. And it's really a goal. We should be, the Greater Lowell Chamber of Commerce is great, and the Middlesex 3 Coalition, but we have to be going into like the mass biotechnical conferences. We have to go into the mass development. We have to go into all of these other councils and interact with them so that we're reaching out to businesses outside the Greater Lowell area. And that's how the BRA does it, and that's the model that we're going to adopt in the future.
I think that's excellent, Mr. Manager, and I suppose this conversation is very timely, knowing that we're looking to model after the BRA. And I happen to think, and I agree with you along the same lines, it's sort of the same housing principle where people can't afford to live in Boston, so they're going to the gateways that are on a commuter rail. Is something similar. They're going to go to a community that has its act together, that is willing to extend certain incentives, any tax incentives to get them to relocate. So this is welcoming news, and I think it goes back to the old-fashioned principle of networking. You can send out a gazillion emails or letters asking for, business, but it's networking and learning from those, people in Boston that get it, and they're in the business, they see the thriving economy, and how can we benefit from it. So I'm sure you'll come forward with a report at some point on that, Mr. Manager, so we'll look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Leary?
I think it's a great motion as well. Just a quick question, it might be a little off topic for now, but I know it's heavy industry there. Are we looking forward to moving that into more of a biotech area, something similar to what we have in Cross Point, or what is the vision of what we're looking to have in that location? I think that's important. I think in the past history, if you go back, not too past history, but you're looking at certain heavy industries that, maybe you don't want to have some of that in there. Maybe you want to have something more along the lines of having what Cross Point area, the Cross Connector area is, and what we're trying to do in the Hamilton Canal. So I think it's a timely motion because once this is done, it's going to open up all new avenues and all kinds of different development that is going to be important to review. Thank you.
Anything else? No. Any motion? Opposed? Our motion passes. Next motion of the evening by Councilor Samaras. Request the city manager to inquire of wind development to provide a report regarding proportional analysis of market rate housing versus affordable subsidized housing in the development portfolio for the city.
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Kennedy. Councilor Samaras.
Thank you. The Hamilton Mill project, as you know, is very important to the city council. And we've now approved the courthouse, and it will be built. But we're looking for the next steps. And as a city council, I think people are expecting that we do due diligence in what decisions we make after this. So this motion basically speaks for itself. I want the percent of market rate housing versus subsidized housing in the wind projects. If that would be possible, that would help. Because I think right now what we want to look at is, do we have people that have disposable income in this area to help bring other businesses in the downtown area? So the more information we have about what's the makeup of the downtown, what's the makeup that we presently have, we can make better decisions down the road as to what directions we're going to take. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Council Belanger?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I do support Councilor Samaras' motive as to this motion. Okay, but the concern I have is that we're asking Wind Development to perform their own peer review study. Okay, I would like, if it's okay with the maker of the motion, to involve planning and development with this study. I mean, they are the master developer, and there's trust here, but I trust but verify, if that helps out any. So I don't think whether any developer or any firm, does their own study, I'm really don't have a big comfort level with that. So I would like to see some involvement, if it's okay with the maker of the motion, with planning and development to be involved in that process, or someone from the administration to, better gauge the amount of units, affordable units that they've had in their portfolio. Because keep in mind, a study was done in 2014, a motion response, a motion I made, that the downtown units that were relatively built in the last 10 years were in the 70% subsidized area, and around that percentage. So I just feel a little more, I have a better comfort zone where, whether it's any firm, it's not specifically Wind Development, but again, it's somebody performing their own feasibility study, and I'm not very comfortable with that. But just with some planning and development or the administration involvement at the same time, and I'm absolutely fine with it, so it's okay with the maker of the motion. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Just curious, Mr. Manager, with, I know with the project this size, but even other projects, isn't DPD always involved with the developer or with a builder in a certain area of the city?
Yes, exactly. In this case, I've been working very closely with Wind, so, I'll be happy to monitor that they're giving us the proper statistics on it. Because I've already talked to Mike O'Brien relative to this issue, and he's going to be providing us this information. So it's certainly verifiable through our assessor's office.
Well, that's what how can we verify this?
Through the assessor's office.
Through the assessor's office,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Any comments? All those in favor, all those opposed, motion passes. Final motion of the evening by Councilor Leahy, request the city manager work with all physical departments, especially DPW and Parks, to be more efficient in review and monitoring external contracts. Seconded by Councilor O'Leary. Councilor Leahy?
Thank you. Through you to the manager. So what I'd like to do with this motion is to take a look at some of our contracts that we sub out for work in the city, whether it be something that our electrical department can do or street department. So what I've noticed over the last few years is we have some contracts that go out, and I don't know exactly all the details in the contract, but I know that the projects could be sped up so they could be done more efficiently and faster, so that in the end, whatever neighborhood the project's being performed in, the neighborhood would benefit from having these projects sped up. So you're not tying up traffic or having people's lawns dug up for unreasonable amounts of times. So, and just watching in the last few months, some of the work, for example, that the Parks Department was doing, they were handed that project over at Shed Park, and they were able to go in and expedite this project and get it done, save the city some money. Some of the work was done on overtime on Saturdays, but in the long run, we saved money by having these projects done in-house. So obviously, there's going to be some financial implications that I'm not aware of, where we can or cannot spend some money. So that's where we need to look at. And I think overall, we're going to expedite some of these projects where we have talented people in our divisions that we can use their expertise. And in the long run, we're going to save money. We're going to expedite projects so everybody's happy in the long run, neighbors and administration. And I think it just benefits the city as a whole, so if that makes sense. it's kind of, there's a lot here, but you get the gist of it. I think in the end, we're gonna save money, which is a good thing, and we're gonna expedite these projects to benefit the neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Leary.
No, I think it's a really good motion. I think more you can bring in-house, the better it is for everybody. Just a question, how many RFPs, how many contracts we go out or vendors we go out that don't have an RFP? I mean, I think that's kind of part of the analysis. Do we have, they all go through that RFP process? And then what's the criteria for going out? So if you have a project, do we have vendors, there's certain vendors that provide services continuously, right, annually, correct? Is there any scenario where we'd have a vendor coming in that isn't part of an RFP?
My policy is whether it requires an RFP or not, we do it.
Okay.
Because I just think you get the best quality job if you do an RFP and pick the most qualified person to do it. So even though you don't have to bid something, we bid it.
So so the administration is, we go out and we do RFPs on all vendor-related business, which I think is important because you get criteria, and then you have objective criteria that you can measure, and then you have good competition between different vendors. It's good, really important, not only good, it's important that you have a diversification of relationships. That's just a good thing, it's good business. I do it in private business. You can't align yourself with just one vendor. You have to really go out and have folks compete, because ultimately that does lead to a better product, and ultimately it saves you cost. But good, I like to hear that. That's a very positive thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. This is a very interesting motion. Interesting is that I do understand what Councilor Leahy is talking about with respect to this. And the reason I say this is because sometimes the best people that are qualified for the job are the very people that we hire to begin with, and that is our city employees. And I'm going to tell you what. Let's take a department, for example, and let's take the water department. I know for a fact that contract RFPs went out, the contractor was selected. They did not deliver everything that they were supposed to deliver, and our very own workers went out and did the work themselves. I firmly believe that there are, in the departments, sometimes you have to weigh what is this against that. If you take a contractor, what is the price versus what can our own people do? Sometimes you hear the word overtime. They could get it done much more reasonable and on time and quality efficient than if you went out to an RFP and paid that high price. I firmly believe that, and I know many examples of that happening in this city. So, Mr. Manager, I'd like you to keep this under advisement, that just because you go out RFP and they give you this price, what would our own city workers be able to accomplish? And we hear the word overtime and we think, oh my goodness, that's a lot of money. When you stop and think of that versus a contract, even with the overtime for our own employees, you're getting a better bargain and you're getting better work. You're getting your money's worth, and it's costing you less by hiring just by putting our own people to overtime. I know of this happening in city departments. That's what I wanted to say.
Mr. Manager.
Tom Belgard calls it smart money.
He's right. He's absolutely right.
So what we do is, I mean, there's plenty of times that, like, I remember our wastewater department cleared out an area for the city.
That's right.
Much better. We use smart money to do it, so, no, we do it.
Smart money happens in not just water department, but many departments in the city, DPW, Parks Department, where our own people, because they got a little bit of overtime, and I know people hate to hear overtime, but in the long run, it saved us more money with the city working the overtime than it did to RFP and use that contractor. I'm telling you, this is true. Smart money, smart people.
Councilor Belanger.
Smart money it is, Councilor Mercia. No, I'm in agreement with my councilors. Let's keep it in-house as best we can. I mean, our city workers often live in the city. I mean, I've seen large projects in the city. I've seen a garage built on Jackson Street with a crew of 30, 40 men not one from Lowell, not one, okay? So let's keep our people busy. And my colleagues are correct, where these projects can, even with overtime, and that puts a lot of food on their plate for our city workers, it still can be far less expensive. And and there's, what outside contractors are notorious for is that they, not only does it cost more money in many cases, but they often abandon the job site and go to another job for a week or two on end, because that's it's an emergency job. They're paid a much higher salary for it, and they'll leave the project and come back. And that's where we lose time and money. So we won't get that with city workers. So I think there's many advantages to the motion. So I look forward to the response, and I know the manager's heart is with our city workers too, and we'll do the best we can for them. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor. Mr. Manager, if I had a quick question concerning this motion. I know a little while ago you brought before us the needle pickup program, and I believe it was Councilor Mercia had asked, isn't that something that DPW could take care of? Is there any update on that?
Yes, Mr. Belgard is working on a program to have the DPW clean that. There gets to a point where we need to hire a professional group. It gets just so out of hand, but we are working, and I'll have Mr. Belgard give a report relative to how far he's come with that program, to have DPW workers do it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Manager. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? So voted. Next section of the agenda under announcements. Any announcements? Councilor O'Leary?
Leahy, thank you.
Oh, sorry, Councilor. One of the same.
Okay, Your Honor. Just one quick announcement was that tonight's joint subcommittee with the school committee had to be postponed until tomorrow night. So we'll be here in the chambers at 5:30 tomorrow night for the joint subcommittee for anybody that can make it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Mercia?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. The Durkin family bridge dedication on Lincoln Street, that'll be Saturday, November 5th at 10 o'clock in the morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Mayor Kennedy?
Mr. Chairman, my announcement was already addressed by either Council Leahy or Leary. I'm not sure which one, but one of them. I'd move to adjourn.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn, second by Councilor Maris. Yeah. Have a good night.